The phrase win and you're in cannot be more true than in survivor leagues. That's the key. You have to win, pick a winner, and you continue to survive. And in this episode, I'll be your survival guide for this upcoming 2025 NFL football season. So that way you survive as long as you can in your leagues. Welcome to Daily Fantasy Statement Games. I am your host, Dr. Derek Bennett, aka Professor Locks. And in this episode, we will be talking NFL Survivor. Yes, NFL Survivor Leagues have become pretty popularized over the last, 5, 10, 15 years. And in this episode, I'm going to be your survivalist. I'll be your survival guide. For those of you that have never tried a Survivor League, or those of you that have been doing them for quite a while, the big thing with Survivor Leagues is picking a winner. And it sometimes is easier said than done when it comes to Survivor Leagues, especially these first few weeks when we don't really know what teams are going to look like. We have a general idea how teams should fare out this upcoming season, but those first few weeks can be really, really tricky to continue to move on in your fantasy, or not your fantasy, your survival leagues, just because we don't know what teams are going to look like. And in this episode, we're going to be going from week 1 all the way through week 18. And just because, it's really hard in Survivor Leagues, because the key is you can only pick a team one time. For those of you that may not necessarily see teams exactly how I like them, or teams that, get off to a rough start and pick things up throughout the season, or vice versa, I'm going to be giving out two games, two winning teams each week. For those of you that may see things a little bit differently than I do in this upcoming season, but it can be really challenging those first few weeks. Like I said, we'll not use the same teams more than twice. And I'm going to give you out 2 picks per week. So once I pick a team twice, they're done. They're off the table, just like in Survivor leagues. But these are kind of 2 different courses, 2 different trails that you can follow in order to make sure that you stay alive in your Survivor leagues. And throughout this, you'll probably pick up on some teams that I'm kind of picking on, just because in my mind, I don't think they're going to be very good teams this upcoming season. You'll probably figure out which teams I'm pretty high on because I will be picking them twice. There were a couple of teams that, to my surprise, I didn't end up picking twice throughout the preparation phases of this episode. But like I said, you'll probably pick out the teams that I'm pretty high on. If you want to know those teams a little bit more so in advance, or even on the back end, me and my good friend, the DGen Doc Sebastian, have done a lot of content up to this point. We've already went through all of our division previews, our team previews as well. We did some NFL futures and awards that we talked about in terms of, picking the division winners, picking our Super Bowl champions, all of those things in past episodes. But in this episode, we're talking Survivor. Again, I'm going to pick out 2 games, 2 teams that I think are going to win each week. And once I pick a team twice, they're off the table. I'm not going to talk about them again, at least on the winning side of things. So before we get into that, there's been some things that have happened over the past few days. I'm recording this on Wednesday, August 27th, 8 days before NFL football kicks off. So all preseason games are done. We're wrapping up, cut downs to that 53-man roster. But, going back to some preseason games, we actually had 4 NFL teams that went 3-0 throughout the preseason. A couple of them were a little bit of a surprise to me. But the Ravens, historically, the Ravens and John Harbaugh perform really, really well in the preseason as well as the in the regular season. We'll see if this is the year that they can get over the hump and bring a Lombardi Trophy back to Baltimore. Me being a Pittsburgh guy, I hope not. On the other hand, sticking in the AFC North, the Browns were able to go 3-0 in the preseason. I think more optimistic in saying that the Browns might go 0-17 and resemble the Lions of a few years back rather than continuing their winning ways once they get into the regular season. But they've made it down to only 3 quarterbacks on their active roster: Joe Flacco, Shedeur Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel. So somehow they've managed to cut their 5 or 6 quarterbacks down to those 3. Kenny Pickett is now out in Las Vegas with the Raiders. The other 2 teams that were 3-0, the Denver Broncos, that I'm pretty high on going into this season, and then the New York Football Giants. My good friend Sebastian, the DGen doc, was probably pretty happy to see that. Again, we'll see if they can continue their winning ways once it gets into the regular season, and how long will Russ, be at the helm of that team, or will they pass the starting quarterback role off to Jackson Dart, who had a pretty damn good preseason. Other happenings around the NFL, just over the last 3 or 4 hours, Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice accepts a 6-game suspension to start the season. Going into basically today, we were all expecting this news to come out kind of mid-season because there was a hearing, I believe week 6, that was said in previous weeks. He is accepting that 6-game ban to start the season, so it does give him a little bit of time to rest up, recuperate. He won't be around the team, but I think that opens up some room for Xavier Worthy and other guys on that Chiefs offense to really get things rolling with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, who is newly engaged, for those of you that have not seen that, although it's all over everywhere at this point. A couple of other things that have just happened over the last couple of days. Adam Thielen gets traded back to the Minnesota Vikings from the Carolina Panthers. I think that it was probably a great move for the Vikings with Jordan Addison having his 3-game suspension to start the year. I'm forgetting his name. Apologies, but their 3rd-string wide receiver has been dealing with some injury stuff. Justin Jefferson has been dealing with some hamstring soft tissue stuff. Again, from our perspective, the DGen doc and myself being healthcare professionals, we're not too concerned with Justin Jefferson, but Adam Thielen returning to his roots in Minnesota, providing another target for JJ McCarthy to throw the ball to, a wily, very, very intelligent wide receiver, should give Kevin O'Connell and that Minnesota Vikings offense a little bit of a boost going into the season. One thing that I did want to bring up, Houston Texans running back Joe Mixon, Caserio came out and basically said that he wasn't necessarily holding anything to Joe Mixon going into this upcoming 2025 season. He was placed on the non-football injury list, basically meaning he's going to miss at least the first 4 games. Outside of that, time will tell to see if he gets that ankle whipped into shape or not. But let's move on to our survival guide, if you will. So first off, I want to just thank the NFL gods and Roger Goodell and all of the people over there at the NFL that have anything to do with schedule making, because they really have made this tough on us once again for Survivor Leagues. They've given us a ton of great matchups, a ton of great storylines, and in week 1, it was pretty hard to bring this, these 2 teams out. And was saying that, not really. I think the 2 teams that I'm looking to back week 1 have 2 of the largest spreads going into week 1, and there's pretty good reason why. The first game that I'm looking to get into is the Cardinals at the Saints. With the Saints, we got a new head coach. Yes, Spencer Rattler is coming back, but he was not a very good starting quarterback last year. And that Saints team as a whole, it just continues to age. So I really have some major questions about the Saints going into this season. And I think the Cardinals had a great offseason, bringing in some guys at key positions. They brought in Will Johnson to help out that secondary. And you have Marvin Harrison Jr. continuing to develop with Kyler Murray over there on the offensive side of the ball. So I really like the Cardinals in week one. I believe, let me just take a quick peek here, that they have the second highest spread going into week one on the road in New Orleans. Yes, at 6.5. The second game that I probably would be my pick is the Titans at the Broncos. Give me the Broncos all the way with a rookie quarterback trying to go up against that Denver Broncos defense. That Denver Broncos secondary is just absolutely nasty. The Broncos have really loaded up on the defensive side of the ball this offseason, bringing over Hufanga and Greenlaw from San Francisco. Bo Nix and Sean Payton got the offense humming in a pretty good way last year, and I think that will continue again this year. You bring in R.J. Harvey as your new starting running back, and that Denver Broncos team is going to be a team to be reckoned with this upcoming season, and I don't think they're necessarily going to drop this first game with Tennessee with that rookie quarterback in Cam Ward making the trip out to Mile High. So in week one, the two teams that I would back are the Arizona Cardinals and the Denver Broncos. Moving on to week two, let me just flip over here. There we go. A couple of teams, again, that I'm just kind of picking on, and that's the Titans and the Saints. The Titans, I do think that they're going to be a better overall organization, better team this upcoming season, but they have a rough couple games to open up, So after the Titans come home from Denver, they have the Los Angeles Rams coming into town, and Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford and all the guys from the Rams. The Rams finished on a really, really high note last year. They really got things rolling in the second half of the season, and I think that they're just going to keep rolling into the first part of this season. Now, I'm not terribly high on the Rams this season, partially due to this whole Matthew Stafford disc-related back issue that he's been having through most of the preseason. With disc issues and low back issues, especially with an aging quarterback, these are things that could just like pop on a dime and things could go south pretty quickly. On the other hand, the Rams do have a pretty decent second quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think the Titans are going to really need to get past these first few weeks before they start to see any improvements out of their rookie quarterback, Cam Ward. I do expect Cam Ward to boost the Titans a little bit, get them a couple more wins potentially. But these first 2 weeks, the schedule makers did not do the Titans any favors. The second team that I'm looking to back is the 49ers. And again, they are going to New Orleans. Yes, I've taken the road team back-to-back weeks going down to New Orleans against the Saints. The 49ers had their worst year in quite some time last year, partially just due to injuries. We all know Christian McCaffrey went down for the majority of the season, first due to kind of bilateral both sides, calf strains, Achilles tendonitis, whatever you want to follow as far as that goes. And then he went down with a PCL strain after that in his knee. On top of that, Brandon Ayuk tore his ACL. You had, Debo out for a couple weeks. Juwan Jennings came on pretty strong, but their defense had some massive injuries last year. So the 49ers just as a whole just didn't have much luck in terms of injuries, and they just never really got going. This year, especially early on, I think the 49ers can get things rolling down in New Orleans and knock off the Saints. Again, first year head coach, as well as Spencer Rattler leading that offense. I just don't expect the Saints to put up a ton of points. And I am a Brock Purdy backer when it comes to the 49ers. I think that he is a solid quarterback. He's got weapons all around him with Juwan Jennings and obviously Kittle, and McCaffrey's going to come back. I think he's going to have a pretty good year this upcoming season. So give me the Rams at the Titans and the 49ers at the Saints in week 2. Starting into kind of week 3, week 4, I started to look a little bit more into where teams were playing before, where teams were playing going into the next week. We start to have a lot of games over in Europe. We start to have some bye weeks going into week 4. So when I was going through my survival guide, I was taking some of those kind of things into consideration. So far, we haven't seen any division matchups. You're not going to see too many of those, just because in division games tend to be a little bit closer. They tend to kind of go back and forth. There are a handful throughout here, but in week 3, again, we don't have any of those. In week 3, I really like the Jets at the Bucs. The Bucs are one of my favorite teams. I'm going to take the Bucs in that matchup in week 3. I think the Bucs have potentially one of the best offenses in the league. Yes, they have Tristan Wirfs, dealing with some injury things going into training camp this season, but I really don't think it matters. I think they have probably the best wide receiver room in football. They have one of the best running backs in football as well. And Baker has done nothing but continue to excel year after year over the past couple years. And on the Jets side of things, again, first year head coach, their offense, I think, will be a little bit better, but just very different compared to last year with Aaron Rodgers. Justin Fields is basically a third running back. They got Braylon Allen, they got Breece Hall. Now you add Justin Fields there. I think they're going to be a run-heavy team. I just think the Bucs have way too much for them on offense, and they can outscore them in Tampa Bay. The other game that I'm looking at is the Raiders at the Commanders. Give me the Commanders in that one. The Raiders, again, I think they're going to be better, but the Commander Stadium is going to be rocking after the year that they had last year. And, they just got Terry McLaurin signed. He completely changes how that offense can be run. He's going to allow Debo to do his thing. Bill Krosky-Merritt is kind of really come onto the scene. And I think early on, him and Austin Eckler are going to be used interchangeably. They're going to be on the field kind of on and off the field quite a bit. And I think that the Commanders and Cliff Kingsbury can get that offense rolling. On the other hand, the Raiders brought in some key pieces in Geno, obviously Ashton Genty. I think that the Raiders are going to be better, but not coming to the East Coast to play the Commanders necessarily in week 3. With the Raiders, that was part of the thing that I also looked at was timing of games. Typically, I don't like West Coast teams coming to the East Coast and playing in that 1:00 time slot, just because for their time it's 10 o'clock in the morning, which is just typically not when our bodies are fully ready to roll and perform at a high level unless we've been doing it. And, the Raiders traveling from Vegas all the way out to Washington, playing in that early time slot gives me a little bit of concern for them. So give me the Commanders and the Bucs in week 3. In week 4, moving on along here, I think the biggest or the easiest game that I had to pick throughout this entire process was in week 4, and that's the Saints at the Bills. I think the Bills at this point of the season might be favored by like 15, 16 points going into this game. And I don't see the Buffalo Bills dropping a game, to the Saints here. On the other hand, we do have our first division matchup, and that's the Titans at the Texans. I like the Texans in that one. Again, I don't think that the Titans are going to be a great team at this point. In Cam Ward's career, most rookie quarterbacks don't excel their first season, especially going up against a pretty damn good quarterback in his own right in Cam Ward, in CJ Stroud. I think the Texans' defensive front is nasty. I think their pass rushers are going to get to Cam Ward early and often in that game. And being in Houston, I think that the Titans are in for a world of hurt there. So in week 4, give me the Bills and the Texans both at home there. That was another thing that I looked at quite a bit while I was picking each week, is where the game is being played. Typically, home teams have a little bit of an advantage. So you don't have to necessarily travel. You got the home crowd behind you. In the NFL, we do have some stadiums that have a little bit more of a home field advantage than others, but just the that overall easier schedule leading up to the game. You're in your own bed the night before. Typically plays for the home team rather than the road team. So most of these that I've picked are home teams, but not all. In week 5, we actually have one team that's a road favorite, or probably will be a road favorite, and another home team. In week 5, let's take a look at the Chiefs at the Jags. I think the Chiefs have a great chance of winning that one, partially due to potentially coming off a loss in Baltimore, or at least to Baltimore. I think it's played in Kansas City, but the Chiefs coming off a potential loss to Baltimore the week before. Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes just don't lose 2 games in a row. So I really think that the Chiefs can take out the Jags in week 5 there. And then the first time that we have a team twice, give me the Baltimore Ravens at home against the Texans. The Ravens just rarely lose in the regular season. It's been quite a few years since the Ravens have had less than 12 wins. I think that is, going to probably continue on this year. They're going to be a 10, 11, 12, plus win team. So with the Ravens, with their history at home in the regular season, give me the Ravens to beat the Texans coming off of that division matchup with the Titans the week before. So in week 5, I have the Chiefs and the Ravens both winning in week 5. As long as we're still alive, let's go ahead and move on to week 6. Week 6, I have a West Coast team coming across to the East Coast. This is one of the further matchups that I actually ended up picking. But give me the Chargers at Miami. I just don't think Miami's going to be very good. At this point, 6 weeks in, we just don't know what the health is going to be of Tua Tagovailoa. Devon Achane has been having some minor things here and there, being a smaller running back. I have a hard time thinking that he's going to make it through a couple seasons in a row fully healthy. And we know how Tua's, health concerns are kind of where they are. So I think that the LA Chargers, Jim Harbaugh brings a rough, tough, run-heavy team into Miami and knocks off the Dolphins in week 6. And then give me my Pittsburgh Steelers at home against the Cleveland Browns. I think the Steelers have had one hell of an offseason, not anything like the Steelers of old. And the Steelers defense is going to be pretty nasty once again, with TJ Watt. Obviously, we still got Highsmith. You got Cameron Hayward. Hopefully their first round pick, Harmon, is fully ready to rock and roll come that week 6 matchup against the Browns. I just don't know if we can trust the Browns quarterback situation at this point. Joe Flacco, as long as he's starting, I think he gives them a decent floor. But I don't think that they have a super high ceiling with the other pieces that they have on this team. Outside of Jerry Jeudy, none of the wide receivers really scare me. From a tight end perspective, I think the Steelers can match up really, really well with the linebackers that they have, and Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen, with the acquisition of Jalen Ramsey. I think that they can really lock down about any tight end that is thrown their way, outside of a couple that are absolute studs and are going to get on anybody. But give me the Steelers and the Chargers in that week 6, in their week 6 matchups against the Dolphins and the Browns there for the Steelers. Before we move on into week 7, I have to tell you a little bit about Bob Lung's fantasy football consistency guide. Yes, get a leg up on your opponents with Bob's 10th annual edition of his fantasy football consistency guide for 2025. People just keep asking for it. There's a reason why he's on this 10th annual consistency guide, because in terms of fantasy football, we want to have those guys that are consistently going to put up points. We don't want those guys that are bouncing around and giving us 20-point weeks, and then it's 3 weeks in a row of single digits, and then all of a sudden they have a little bit of a boost. And we want somebody that's going to go out and perform week after week, so we know, hey, this guy, just go ahead and put 15 points on the board. With Bob Lung's fantasy consistency guide going for only $15 on Amazon. Purchase yours today before time runs out. Just search 2025 Fantasy Football Consistency Guide on Amazon and purchase yours today. All right, so getting back into our survival guide, week 7 was probably the toughest week for me to pick 2 teams that I really thought were basically winners. And I kind of went back to the well and found out who the New Orleans Saints were going to be playing. And this week, the Saints are on the road in Chicago against the Chicago Bears. The Bears, I think, are going to be improved. I think, Ben Johnson coming in there, again, first-year head coach, but that dude's mind offensively is absolutely insane. I think it's going to take a few weeks to, get Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams on the same page. By week 7, I think they're going to be rocking and rolling and really doing pretty well and putting up some pretty good points. I think the Bears defense is going to be improved as well. They put in some, they brought in some guys up front that I think is going to make a pretty big difference in run defense. And I think from a Saints perspective, that's really all that I'm worried about if I'm going up against the Saints is Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller and some of those other guys coming out of the Saints backfield. Because I don't necessarily trust Spencer Rattler to get Olave and Rashid Shaheed the ball. So give me the Bears against the Saints there in week 7. The other game that I ended up picking in week 7 was the Colts at the Chargers. I think that the Chargers are, again, going to be one of those rough, tough teams. They were a playoff team last year. Jim Harbaugh provides, a pretty good floor for pretty much any team that he is coaching. But yeah, the Colts traveling out to the West Coast, going up against the LA Chargers. Give me the Chargers in that one. I just think that they're going to be able to win up front, and they have the better quarterback. So give me the Chargers and the Bears in week 7. Again, that was probably the toughest week for me to pick throughout the entire NFL season. Week 8. If as long as we're still surviving, the survival guide is working. Give me the Bengals at home against the Jets in week 8. I think the Bengals are obviously one of the most high-powered offenses with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and all the guys down there in Cincinnati. The Jets, I think, are going to be improved. I think they're going to have a better football team. I just don't know if they can outscore the Bengals at this point. The Jets are probably going to try to muddy this one up, really slow the game down with their running game. At the end of the day, I trust Joe Burrow over Justin Fields in that matchup to bring home a W, because I also think that the Jets defense isn't quite as good as it was 2 or 3 years ago. So give me the Bengals at home against the Jets, and then give me the Falcons at home against the Miami Dolphins. Again, I just don't think Miami's going to be very good, mostly just due to I'm concerned health-wise. And defensively, I don't know if they're necessarily going to have enough to stop Michael Penix in that Falcons offense. The Falcons have absolute studs at every level on the offensive side of the ball. They have one of the best offensive lines in the league. Drake London kind of proved himself last year and became one of those, top 10, top 15 types of wide receivers. And, you still have Bijan Robinson, who's probably the number one running back in all of football right now. So give me the Falcons at home against the Miami Dolphins in week 8. Week 9, I again went back to the Saints and figured out who the Saints were playing. They played the Rams. The Rams are at home. Give me the Rams in week 9. And then the other one was a little bit tougher. I ended up going with the Packers at home against the Panthers. I just think that the Packers are going to be one of the more consistent teams this upcoming season. They had very little turnover in terms of the roster throughout the offseason. I do think that Jordan Love takes a little bit of a step forward and becomes one of those top 10, 12 types of quarterbacks. Bryce Young, I still have, I don't know if I would say doubts, but I still have concerns with Bryce Young and that offense. I think the Panthers brought in some good pieces, but I still don't necessarily think that the Panthers are going to have a year this upcoming season. You just traded away your number one wide receiver last year in Adam Thielen to the Vikings, and Leggett and the other wide receivers there, Ted McMillan. I just don't know, if everything's going to fall right for the Panthers this upcoming season. The Packers, I think, still have one of the better defenses in the league and are able to hold Bryce Young and the Panthers for that week 9 matchup. So in week 9, again, give me the Rams coming off the bye at home against the Saints, and give me the Packers at home against the Panthers. Going on to week 10, this is another one that was pretty tricky for me, but at the end of the day, I just had to kind of follow the NFC or the AFC South flow chart in this one. And the Texans, for whatever reason, just own the Jags, whether it's on the road or at home. And this one, they're at home. So we get the Houston crowd backing the Texans. And I think that the Texans continue to roll against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that's the second time that I've picked the Texans. We won't hear any more as far as the Texans go. The other one, Browns at Jets. Give me the Jets in that matchup. I think that at this point, the Browns will probably have a rookie starting quarterback, whether it's Shadur or Dylan Gabriel. The Jets, on the other hand, I think have at least competent quarterback play in Justin Fields. That offense is going to run through him and those two running backs, Braylon Allen and Breece Hall. You still have Garrett Wilson out wide. And I think the Jets, although not the same defense that they had a couple of years ago that was absolutely dominant, I think they still have playmakers all over the field on the defense. It really comes down to whether their defensive line stays healthy and can kind of return to form of a couple years ago. But give me the Jets at home against the Brownies in that matchup. Going into that one, even 10 weeks out, take the under in that matchup. Moving on to week 11, give me the Ravens to take out the Browns as well. The Ravens travel to Cleveland in that matchup, and at that point, the Ravens are going to continue on their winning ways, assuming that we don't have some catastrophic injury where Lamar Jackson goes down. Again, that Ravens defense is probably going to be nasty once again. Their secondary is incredible. They have playmakers all over the place, and the Browns will probably have a rookie starting quarterback at that point. So give me the Ravens in that week 11 matchup. And then give me the Packers going to MetLife against the Giants in week 11. I think the Giants are going to be an improved unit, but by week 11, I don't know if Russell Wilson is going to be your starting quarterback. My guess is it'll probably be Jackson Dart. And I really think that the Packers in general are going to have a little bit of a year here. I think I do have them winning the NFC North, and the Packers defense still has a bunch of dudes over there, a bunch of first round talent. Obviously, they lose Jair Alexander to the Ravens this offseason, but they've kind of played the last year and a half without him anyways. He's had a lot of inconsistencies in terms of staying on the field and actually being available to play. So give me the Packers at the Giants in week 11, and then give me the Ravens at the Browns in week 11. Moving on to week 12. We're getting closer to Thanksgiving, but we're not there yet. Give me the Lions taking out the Giants at home in week 12. This is one of those where I just completely trust MCDC and that Lions team to continue to be pretty dominant as a football team. They lost both their OC and DC this past season. I think Jared Goff and Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown continue to really excel offensively. They did lose a couple pieces up front, but I think by week 12 that offensive line is going to start gelling and be able to withstand that Giants defensive front that could be a problem for many teams going into this 2025 season. And then the second game in week 12, give me the 49ers at home against the Panthers. The Panthers traveling out to the West Coast in this one. I think that the 49ers are just going to be too much for them. Again, I think the Panthers are better. But again, assuming, overall health and we don't have a collapse like we did last year for San Francisco, I think the 49ers just have more talent on their roster. And have had the more consistent team as a whole over the past few years. And I think that they are going to go back towards that compared to last year. I think they have a bunch of pieces that they have to replace on defense. But the Panthers defense doesn't necessarily scare me either way. So give me Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle and the boys to take out the Panthers in week 12. Finally, we move on to Turkey Week, Thanksgiving Week, week 13. I did pick one Thanksgiving Day game as well as one game that will be played on Sunday for this survival guide. So give me the Chiefs at the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. The Cowboys just historically haven't been super great on Thanksgiving. And most likely they're going to be coming off of a hard-fought division matchup against the Eagles and probably coming home with a loss in that one. And I think the Chiefs, for whatever reason, are just as consistent as it gets. They play and have been playing a lot of these kind of earlier games, holiday games, where it's not necessarily, a regular schedule. And Andy Reid and the boys just continue to win and do pretty well in those types of games. So give me the Chiefs at the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. And then moving on to the Sunday slate after Thanksgiving, giving me the Bucs at home against the Arizona Cardinals. I think that the Bucs are one of my Super Bowl favorites. I'm going to be betting on them to do pretty well and get into. I think I have them winning their division, getting into the playoffs, and then I believe I'll have to look back here. Yeah, I have them getting to the NFC championship game and beating the Lions. So I have them making it all the way to the Super Bowl. So I do think that the Bucs are able to handle the Cardinals coming to the East Coast. Again, I kind of looked at those East Coast to West Coast to East Coast, looked at timing of particular games and kind of back some of these games by that. So give me the Bucs and the Chiefs in week 13. The Chiefs winning there on Turkey Day. Week 14, we're getting obviously to kind of the final third, back quarter of the season here. And things are getting a little bit tougher because obviously I've started to use some teams twice quite a few times. I've already used the Bucs and the Chiefs twice, the Texans twice, the Rams twice, the Ravens, the Packers, the Niners. And it started to become a little trickier. So In week 14, give me the Jets to win a division matchup at home against the Miami Dolphins. And then give me the Jacksonville Jaguars to get a win at home against the Colts. A couple division matchups in this week. And it was one of those things where I started to kind of have to formulate storylines in my own head, how this NFL season is going. At this point in the season, week 14, I think that the Colts are probably going to start imploding. I don't know if the whole Daniel Jones thing's necessarily going to work out. I'm not 100% sure by week 14 that Anthony Richardson isn't going to be their starting quarterback. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are continuing to get better throughout the season. So give me the Jags at home against the Colts. And again, I don't think Miami's going to be very good. I think the Jets are continuing to improve. And I think by this point in the season, Miami might be a shell of the roster that we are seeing now. If it's still healthy, I still don't necessarily think that I would go against the Jets. I think the Jets as a whole have a really solid roster at their key pieces. They should have one of the better offensive lines in the league with all of the draft capital that they've spent over the past 2 or 3 seasons. You still have one of the best backfields in Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, Justin Fields, like I've talked before. And their defense is a lot better than Miami's defense at the end of the day. The Jets defense, again, isn't as good as a couple years ago, but that Miami defense has holes all over the place. I don't know who they're going to pair up with to cover Garrett Wilson on the outside. So give me the Jets and the Jags in week 14. Week 15, the first game was pretty easy. The second game was a little trickier for me. Give me the Eagles at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. I still think the Eagles have one of the best rosters in the league. Yes, they had a lot of turnover on the defensive side of the ball, a couple pieces on offense as well, but they still have all of the main guys on offense in terms of AJ Brown and Saquon and Devonta Smith and Goddard and obviously Jalen Hurts, and their offensive line is still going to be nasty. So give me the Eagles against the Raiders in that one, and then give me the Seahawks bringing Indianapolis Colts to Seattle. The Seattle defense should be pretty good. And at this point in the season, again, I just don't necessarily know if I can fully trust that Colts offense. I think they're going to have to really move the ball through the running game for the majority of the season as a whole. And Seattle's defensive front is going to be really, really solid. So give me the Seahawks and the Eagles come week 15. With 3 weeks left, going into week 16, give me the Broncos to win at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Broncos are one of my favorites to win the Super Bowl going into the season. And the team that I think is going to win the Super Bowl is my other pick this week, the Buffalo Bills traveling to Cleveland. I think the Broncos and the Bills are both going to be really, really solid teams. I have them winning their divisions in their respective divisions. So in week 16, this is where, playoff teams are starting to lock up divisions. They're starting to lock up seeding spots. And the Broncos and Bills, I think, are going to be locked in come this week 16. Week 17, we got some Christmas games popping up here. And again, we have to start thinking playoff seeding, playoff spots as a whole, and which teams are still going to be fighting for some of those and which teams might not be. So in this one, give me the Commanders in a division rivalry game against the Cowboys. Week 17, I think the Cowboys are probably going to be out of it at this point once again. And the Commanders, are probably going to be fighting for one of those wild card spots. Obviously, we still have the Philadelphia Eagles in that division. I have them winning the division once again, even though it's the NFC East. No teams won it 2 years in a row. I still have them winning this upcoming season. The Commanders, on the other hand, are going to be fighting for their lives for a playoff spot. I think they might take a little bit of a step back This year, Jaden Daniels might have a little bit of a sophomore slump, although they have given him weapons all over the field and have really done, the best that they can to bring in some key guys on the offensive line. Obviously, we bring in Debo. But yeah, give me the Commanders at home against the Cowboys in that Week 17 matchup. And then on the flip side, I just talked about these two teams a few weeks prior in Week 14. Give me the Colts at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is a flip. I have them each winning basically at home in this matchup. So it could potentially be kind of a revenge game for the Colts in that Week 17 spot. I think the Jags are probably going to continue to be in the playoff hunt, and I don't know if the Colts necessarily will, but they could definitely play spoiler for their division rivals in the Jags. And the Colts have really played the Jags really well over the past few years, with the Jags only winning a couple of games over the last, I think, 4 seasons in that rivalry. So in Week 17, give me the Commanders and the Colts to win that week. And then finally, Week 18, all the way at the end of the season. I don't even want to think about it at this point because football hasn't even started. I don't want to even think about the end yet. But Week 18, again, we have to be thinking about playoff seeding, getting into the playoffs as a wild card team. So I picked a couple of teams that I think will be in that wild card hunt that have to win that Week 18 game, that I don't necessarily think will be resting guys, and those types of things. So give me the Cincinnati Bengals to beat the Cleveland Browns on Week 18 in Cincinnati to potentially propel them into the NFL playoffs, as well as the Atlanta Falcons at home taking on the New Orleans Saints once again to continue to propel those Atlanta Falcons into the playoffs. I think it's just one of those things where the Bengals offense is going to be solid outside of, major injuries. Their defense is going to be what their defense is. Last year it was awful. And I think that's going to be the case again this year. And I don't know if the Bengals are going to, accumulate enough wins to get into Week 18 and not have a playoff spot, just like they did Week 17, Week 18 last year. So I think the Bengals are going to be in the hunt for the playoffs. I do think that they're going to have to play up to their best. And at this point, the Browns might be playing for that number 1 overall draft pick. Same thing with the Saints, with the Falcons potentially looking to find one of those wild card spots. They're going to have to win. I have the Bucs winning that division. And I think, again, the Saints and Browns are going to be 2 of the worst teams in the league, kind of vying for that, 1 overall come the NFL draft. So give me the Bengals, give me the Falcons in Week 18 of this season. And that's it in terms of the survival guide. With Survivor, we just got to pick a winner week after week after week. And we're in. We're moving on to the next week. It's really, really hard to survive, especially those early weeks where we don't necessarily know how teams are looking early on, which offseason moves are going to gel, which, are going to kind of fall to the wayside and end in disaster. But, this should give you a pretty good outlook in, when to pick teams to use in your Survivor leagues, when to maybe drop back and pick some of those teams that may not necessarily be, the Ravens and the Bills and the Eagles and some of those teams that typically win week after week after week. Sometimes we have to choose the Texans or the Jets or the Commanders or the Chargers that, yes, they're pretty good teams, but we have to look at matchups and figuring out when teams are playing, what teams they're coming off of playing. A lot of times matters in Survivor leagues. But that's your survival guide. I am your survivalist, Dr. Derek Bennett. Moving on, heading into the season, my buddy Sebastian, the DGen Doc, and I are going to be doing shows every single week picking college football games. We'll be doing our college football 6-pack. Everybody knows what a 6-pack is. Everybody loves to stop by, the beer distributor, the gas station, the grocery store, pick them up a 6-pack of whatever beverage you like and take it home and pound it, watch it in some football games. So we got our college football 6-pack coming out every Wednesday morning. And then coming out every Thursday morning, we have our NFL picks that we like going into the upcoming week. So stay tuned week after week after week. Coming out this upcoming week, we'll be throwing out our college football 6-pack as well as our NFL best bets. And that'll continue every single week this NFL season. But that is not all. We also have some fantasy football stuff that we'll be doing. We'll be doing some other, waiver wire picks. We'll be doing some injury breakdowns because that's what we do best as healthcare providers. So we'll be throwing out all kinds of content all season. For those of you that have not already, please give us a follow, subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment down below if you like the games that I've picked. If you're fading some of the games that I pick, throw those out there too. We'd like to respond and kind of have a little bit of a banter session with you guys as well. So that is it for me, Professor Locks. And in your Survivor leagues, I wish you all the best. Unless you're in mine, then you can fall off as soon as you can. But from Professor Locks here at DFSG Plus, we are out of here.